What is up, fans of Grapplers Talk? This is Dave coming at you with another episode each and every week. Thank you to all of the fans for all of the support we get. Thank you for downloading, tuning into each and every podcast, each and every episode. First of all, I just want to say thank you to our partners over at Spar Bar Soap, providing the best antibacterial, antifungal, antimicrobial, whatever. It kills everything. All the best for training and after jujitsu. Go check them out. Spar Bar Soap. Type in code word Grapplers Talk, and you will get 10% off of your order over there. Go like and follow them on Instagram and Facebook as well. They're great friends of the show. Also, thank you to our partners over at Butterfly X, providing awesome rash guards, training equipment. They're now making gis and belts. And if you need your gear lined up for your academy, go check them out on their website or on their Instagram page, BFX Gear, Butterfly X. Use code word Grapplers Talk 10 on any of your orders over there. You'll get 10% off of your order. Thank you to our partners again for the show, for everything they do, and we just appreciate all of you guys. I'm thrilled to have a guest on this week. I've been following this gentleman for quite some time. I've sent people his way because I know he produces amazing results. I've never seen him or never needed to see him, thankfully, and but I know what he does really works, and I have a few friends that have used some of his techniques and tactics, and really is amazing at what he does. But I'm joined today via Zoom by none other than on Instagram. He's called Doctor Kickass. But thank you for being a part of this, man. We truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us on Grapplers Talk.
Yeah, man. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, and I'm a nerd when it comes to jujitsu. I've been training since 2005. I love it to death. I want to hear how you got started. Who recruited you? What was that first training session and going into the gym like?
Sure. So, when I was a kid, big fan of Ninja Turtles and Jean-Claude Van Damme. You know, and as a kid, you try like a lot of different martial arts, like Taekwondo and karate, but I never really like stuck with anything for more than, I don't know, 1 or 2 months. When I was in high school, I tried some Japanese jiu-jitsu. And at the time I thought, I'm like, oh wow, this is like I finally learned something real. And I ended up wasn't related to jujitsu, but I ended up hurting my knee. I ended up what's called I have a patellar subluxation, so my kneecap would slide out of place. It kept happening, and I ended up having surgery. It's called a lateral release. They don't really do the surgery anymore because the outcomes are pretty poor. But this was 25 years ago now, so medicine was different. So that kind of took me out for the rest of high school. And then when I went to college, I was like, okay, my knee is better. Now is the time I want to find a martial art. And then because I'd done, a few months of Japanese jiu-jitsu, and then I went to a gym that had a Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So this is just a local college club, right? So
Yeah.
it was taught by a white belt. So I'm surprised we weren't all crippled. But there was Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I remember like my first class, I was like, oh, this is what I've always been looking for.
Yeah.
Despite learning from a white belt, I knew like I found what I was looking for.
Yeah. That's unique, and you definitely stuck with it. And talk about that first initial injury and going through that
Sure.
surgery, and what was the rehab like at the time, and how long were you out, and
Sure.
how long did it take you before you got mobile again?
So I think I was like 15 when I had or maybe 14 when I had the initial injury. But I'm like, I'm not an athlete. I'm a nerdy guy. Like I didn't play sports as a kid. I mean, I did play sports, but not in high school. Like I kind of stopped after middle school. So, when I had the knee injury, I did rehab, but I don't think, like as a teenager, like I wasn't super committed. Like it wasn't like I need to rehab to get back to this. It was just, and I didn't realize if it kept happening, like I was going to need surgery. Um, and also at the time, like rehab has grown a lot since over the last
Yeah.
25 years. So looking back, like it wasn't really a great experience. Like I didn't really strengthen my knee the way I was supposed to. It happened a few times. So then, the surgeon recommended surgery. and when you're a kid and a surgeon says, "Hey, try this," you just say, "Okay, well, he's a doctor. He should know what he's talking about." And again, in hindsight, now I should have tried rehab much more. Now, in situations like this, they probably would have done a different surgery. So nowadays, there's a surgery called the MPFL surgery where they would have reconstructed the patellar ligament. That wasn't a thing they do back then. So I had the surgery. I have a giant scar across the top of my knee that looks like I had a joint replacement. Back then, they weren't doing arthroscopic surgeries. I was in like a brace for like 6 weeks, and the biggest problem with that lateral release surgery. So what they do is you have your lateral quad muscle, your vastus lateralis, and you have some fascial connections to the patella. And the idea with the lateral release is they think that there's too much pressure that's pulling the kneecap out of place. So what they do is they trim some of that pull, which the theoretical idea was to try to stop that knee from sliding out of place. But in the process, and this is a pretty big complication with what they know now, is now you develop like extensive quad weakness. So
Okay.
I pretty much like a quadricep means four muscles, right? I essentially only have like three quad muscles on that knee. Now,
Wow.
luckily, because I've been doing jiu-jitsu for so long and I had a weak knee the whole time, I just adapted a style. So like if we rolled, like you wouldn't know that I had a weak knee because I just adapted, right? But that wasn't a thing when I wasn't thinking jujitsu when I had the surgery. Ironically, I didn't know that the rehab was bad, so I go back to the same place, and it wasn't meant for athletes or anything too. So now fast forward a year, so I'm like 15, 16. I remember like I had to teach myself how to run, like when you're like with your buddies and like you're like running across the street. Like I remember the first time I was like galloping across the street, and all my friends are making fun of me.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of different things there, but being a young man and going through surgery, I went through a shoulder surgery at a young age too, and it seems like the first thing the doctor pushed on my family was surgery, and it wasn't therapy. And I don't know what it is. I don't have the expertise, but it seems like that's kind of the first route. A lot of your practical, normal doctors, not sports doctors or specialists, kind of revert to. It seems like at least years ago when I had my surgery. And then the same thing you talked about the therapy aspect of it. I went to just your normal physical therapy place where they got old people on little treadmills and different things like that. So it wasn't really designed for a jujitsu athlete. I told them I trained jujitsu. They didn't even know what it was at the time. I'm over there trying to work different exercises to increase my mobility and strength for
Sure,
jujitsu. And they're just like, okay, yeah, roll a ball up a wall, just to get some mobility back. And
yeah,
so there's a lot of advancements in technologies, but there's a lot of benefits of going to specialists or
sure.
or the correct doctors, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like people think that, physical therapy is all the same. It's like, is every strength coach the same? Is every jujitsu coach the same? Are there levels to coaching? Are there just like with physical therapy? So most people just go to their local physical therapist, which most local physical therapists are really they're generous. Like that's the goal of physical therapy school is you should be able to help people in some capacity versus, they're not necessarily specialized for athletes or in cases like mine, like super specialized in the sport of jujitsu. Now, again, I do work as a physical therapist in addition to working with athletes, and then obviously my focus is jujitsu. But as a physical therapist, for the most part, like you kind of need to be able to help people a little bit, even if it's not your focus.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Therapy is very unique, and if it's not done the correct way, it can really, put you in the same situation. I had rehabbed my shoulder as best as I thought, and it was like 2 years later, I had the same injury, dislocated again. It was
Sure,
just a reoccurring problem, and that was after the first surgery. So
sure,
it was real disappointing, for a young man like me going through that and going through all that time, and then for it just to happen again
sure,
shortly later, thinking I did everything the
sure,
correct way.
sure. Yeah, and I think that's something that people forget. Like a lot of times people think that the surgery is going to fix it, or like when we can talk about orthobiologics, like we'll just get stem cells or or peptides, and that's just going to fix the issue. Really, like all surgery does is correct the anatomy. So when people have some type of injury, there's some type of anatomical defect, you correct that, but then you still need to regain your strength, regain your mobility, regain tissue resilience is a thing that's underappreciated in rehab, which is again, if you have something like if you have a shoulder dislocation where they stabilize it, you need to make sure that that joint capsule is as snug and as stable that it needs to be, because jiu-jitsu, like you're going to be put in those positions whether you want to or not. Like I'm a black
Right.
belt, like it doesn't matter. I can't just say like, oh, no one's gonna put my arm over my head. Like,
Yeah.
like it's gonna happen. It just That's
Yeah.
just jujitsu, right? So I need to be prepared for when my shoulder is put in that position, like it's not going to explode. And when I work with clients, like that's the main thing is when if you're working with someone with a shoulder dislocation, I got to make sure when they're in that Americana, they're in that underhook position, and someone's doing like an aggressive overhook, like that shoulder doesn't re-explode.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about understanding and again, I revert back to just my knowledge with myself, and I
Sure,
would talk to my doctors and say I trained jujitsu, and most of them had no idea, no experience. They looked
sure,
at me like, whatever that is, you'll probably never be able to do it again.
yeah,
You know, if it's joint locks and joint manipulation,
sure,
things like that, you're
sure,
done, sir.
sure,
And had I been a weak-minded person, let the doctor influence my mind, I would probably not be training and never made it to
sure,
black belt today. But having someone that understands that, and having therapists, again, I went into my therapy and I told them all what I did. None of them
sure,
knew what jujitsu was.
yeah,
So having somebody that understands that and is trying to get you back to that point, like you
sure,
said, getting to a point to where you can move your shoulder behind your back and stable positions,
sure,
and knee injuries are huge in jujitsu, right? And
yeah.
I mean, I want to ask you a couple quick fire questions, but like, what is probably the most common injury you see in jujitsu athletes?
The most common joint is the knee for sure. Like
Yeah,
across, it's not just jiu-jitsu. That's all grappling. So jiu-jitsu, wrestling, judo, knee is by far the most commonly injured thing. And like when you say knee injury, then you could kind of break it down: ligamentous versus meniscus. That's where things get a little bit fuzzy, but for the most part, the knee is going to be so. And there's no systematic review that looks at it, but I've looked at all of the injury data. Knees number one, shoulders number two, and ribs number three, and that's fairly consistent among like many different papers that I've looked at, and that matches also what I see clinically.
yeah. Yeah, but it seems like, if you're in this long enough, you may experience some sort of injuries. And I
Sure,
mean, jujitsu is a lifelong journey, so it's
sure,
very, very rare to to make it
sure,
through all of those years without experiencing something. It can start to affect your mental capacity,
sure,
and some people disappear from it and
yeah,
never go back to jujitsu.
yeah.
Talk about the mental aspect of an injury, how you can overcome that, and what are some of the things that you can do to stay in the right path with that.
Yeah, so I mean that's obviously a great question. So I mean there was some research I looked at where like and this data was looking at martial arts, not just necessarily jiu-jitsu specific, but even within 1 week of injury, because so many martial artists, whether they do jiu-jitsu or combat sports, whatever, so much of their identity is tied into that. Like when they have an injury and they can't do it, there's going to be like significant like emotional toll, anxiety, etc. So it's rough. And I think jujitsu guys too, like maybe they're like runners, but they're kind of like drug addicts where like and they go back whether they shoot or not. Like I've had people like, oh yeah, my shoulder popped out of place. I just put it back in, and I'm gonna do the put my hand in the belt strategy. I'm not gonna use it. I'll be fine. And like one of the things that I think people appreciate with me is I was a jiu-jitsu guy. I fought MMA before I was a physical therapist. So I did all those dumb things. Every time I'm like, I hurt my shoulder and I put my hand in my belt, not only did I make things worse, but I didn't like that wasn't really like good. Like I didn't really benefit from that time on the mat because I was so limited. So I was like, wouldn't it have been smarter to just kind of take it off, go back at the right time, so that when I do go back, it's like beneficial in that time.
Yeah.
So I get that, and obviously when these bigger injuries, there's some data that if you're going to have an injury that takes you out of the sport for longer than 4 months, like your chance of quitting the sport's like 4 to 6 times greater than it would be, you know,
Wow.
and which is, a lot of times like people don't realize, because that's the thing is, you don't appreciate how it is having a functional body until it's taken away, right? So if you have
Yeah.
a shoulder dislocation and you're playing sports, you're doing jiu-jitsu and you're wrestling, you have a shoulder dislocation, you have surgery, now you're in a sling, like it's pretty emotionally taxing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've had two surgeries on my shoulder and experienced ups and downs, and like I said, my doctors, the experts that you look to
Sure.
and the therapists are telling me, hey, whatever jujitsu is, you're not going
Yeah.
back. In my mind, I'm saying, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
First, as soon as my shoulder's good enough to move,
Yeah.
I'm on those mats.
Sure.
And like you said, sometimes it's not to our best
Yeah.
health and things like that, but we do it and we overcome. And I had a surgery, and thankfully the second one was very successful, and I've been
Sure.
able to stay consistent, and I've had great results ever since then. But we're talking almost a year and a half of not really being able to use my shoulder like a normal shoulder. Several therapy sessions a week, like 3 to 4
Sure.
therapy sessions a week, just to get it usable.
Sure.
Not to mention to be able to grapple. So, I mean, there was a time where, I mean, I'd slip into a depression and slip into a low point of not having what I had. And it can be damning, and it can be hard on an athlete, like you said. And especially you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel at first, unless you have the right people around you.
Yeah, and like, that's the thing that's unfortunate with some medical professionals. If you're working with someone who's not worked with athletes and they tell you you're not going back, like that light of the tunnel is that much dimmer, right? So and that's why like for me, I really don't like working with orthopedic surgeons that aren't working with athletes because, I worked with a client and she didn't even do jujitsu. Like she was like, she had a back injury. She's like in her 30s, and a physician told her, she's like, "Oh, you should quit your job, which wasn't even physical, and go to gardening." And I was like, "What?" And there is going to be the unfortunate case, like there are people that are going to have very significant injuries that truly might be you should stop jujitsu. Like, Keenan Cornelius' dad, Tom Callos. So he had like a hip replacement, so he had a hip replacement, it got worn down, and then he ended up breaking his femur, I think, with a revision.
Wow.
And so I mean, but again, he's been doing like 40 years of martial arts at this point. And then his physician's like, you should probably stop. Because at some point with like joint replacements, they can't revise it anymore. But again, you're like, that's a kind of an extreme situation. Like this is his revision on a joint replacement. There's some people, if you have like multi-segment spine fusions, maybe jiu-jitsu isn't, but there's a point where like you don't need to jump straight to you're an athletic young guy, you need to quit jiu-jitsu. Like there's levels to it. And I mean, I think what makes jiu-jitsu hard is jiu-jitsu is something that you can do in later years. Like I'm a master's athlete. I mean, I can do full jiu-jitsu, but I have a lot of, whether they're clients or students that are doing very modified jiu-jitsu. So it's not always like EDCC finals. Like it might be just like that old guy style, like they're just playing, a lazy half guard game, but they're still
Right.
able to do jujitsu in some capacity.
Right.
You look at Hito Gracie, he was doing jujitsu into his 80s, like late 80s. I mean, again, he's not necessarily like aggressively rolling with takedown, very modified, but he was able to do some form of jujitsu
Yeah.
in later years.
Yeah. Yeah, also, I talk to a lot of people about the benefits of going and watching still,
Sure.
even with an injury, and getting in the room and training the mind. And is there any sort of science behind that you're aware of, or any sort of research that you're aware of behind, with an injury, staying in there and still continuing to watch?
I think that maintains habit, because what happens if you have a big injury and then you get off the mats and you're not going to class and now your interest changes, maybe it's hard to get back on track. But if you're going to class, you're you know you I have a lot of clients that they'll go to class and watch, and they do their rehab during the rolling portion, right? So they're still invested in the school. They're still, so that it's less of a that emotional toll because it's not taken away. They're still going to jiu-jitsu. It's just in the capacity that they're cleared to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I always encourage people, don't ever stop doing what you love, right? You can be in there in some sort of capacity. It may not be the capacity you want at first, but it's gonna keep in the environment, keep you encouraged, being on the same route,
Sure.
get the encouragement from your training partner and friends.
Sure.
So I got a couple quick questions. How did you come up with
The captain now is a doctor.
yeah.
And then yeah, and at first when I came up with my Instagram, the whole point was supposed to educate. So the point of my Instagram was because like I would roll with people and I'd get them in a straight foot lock and they tap super quick and they're like, oh, I don't play like that. I don't play foot locks. Those are dangerous. And I'm like thinking a straight ankle lock is legal in like kids divisions,
Yeah.
white belt divisions. And these are purple belts. I was like, how do you not know the difference between a heel hook and a straight ankle lock, right? So that was kind of like what motivated me to start. And then I was like trying to think of a name, and I kind of went back and forth. I was like, well, the name Doctor Kickass is hilarious. And I didn't really expect it to grow any. I didn't expect there to be any traction. Like I didn't anticipate I'd be where I am now. So like there was like a point when I had about 2,000 followers. I was like, should I change to have something that's a little bit more professional? But then I realized that like having such a ridiculous name that's so unique, because there's a lot of now, fast forward like 10 years. Now there's a lot of like physical therapists that work with jiu-jitsu, and a lot of their names are pretty generic. So it's like, well, how do you tell the difference versus like nobody's getting me confused with anybody else.
Right. You want to be
Um,
memorable.
yeah. Like I have people who literally don't know my first name, like they just know me as Dr. Kickass, which is hilarious.
So we were talking a little bit about you dabbled in MMA for
Sure.
a brief time, but talk about some of the injuries that you've seen in MMA athletes. MMA seems like it's probably, I mean, you could get leg breaks,
Sure, sure, sure,
dislocations. I mean, a
sure.
variety of different things. So, what's some of the worst stuff that you see with the MMA side?
I would see from an MMA that you're not going to see in grappling is you're going to see those more traumatic bone injuries just from striking while impact. So I think the leg break that you see, like the Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman leg break, or Conor McGregor, I think that's the worst
Yeah,
because that's going to, especially if you're a striking athlete, that's going to take you out for a long time. Like I know Darren Elkins had the same injury. He got hurt in training though, but like because Darren Elkins is like primarily a grappler, it like he's been back and fought since the injury, and a lot of people don't even know that he had that injury. Versus someone like Anderson Silva, like he's a like not only is he a striking specialist, but he kicks a lot. So taking away that weapon really kind of affected him. If you look at Chris Weidman's been pretty vocal about like his psychological as he came back to the UFC after that injury, and he'd been throwing the kick in training, but it's a little bit different throwing it without shin guards in a fight, and
absolutely.
you can still see how he pulled back on those kicks a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, obviously he didn't come back at the same level as he did before the injury, but that might not have been the injury. It could have been age. It's one of those things where MMA is you know, not a forgiving sport. So
Now, I don't know what it is, but something behind the same guy being involved with the Anderson Silva leg
yeah,
break and
yeah,
also throwing the same kick. What could it possibly be that's tied in or connected, or is that just a rare occurrence? The MMA gods shining upon us
sure.
with that kind of thing happening.
So I got a little bit of a few thoughts on this. So one, I think that in Muay Thai, like if you're a Muay Thai fighter, you're doing so much shin conditioning, like a lot more than MMA, because MMA you're splitting your time so much. So I think in Muay Thai you see it a lot less because of that. They spend more time on shin conditioning. It also could be that Muay Thai, especially in the US, doesn't get the same attention. So like maybe in Thailand there's more that we don't know about because that's a thing too. They're just more attention now.
Yeah.
Uh, I think a big thing from a technical perspective too is like a lot of these injuries happen with a naked kick, meaning like they're not set up. They just throw the kick that's easily blocked. And then just there is those anatomical, like, it does it hit with the side of the leg where the the tibia is a little bit weaker versus like because the tibia is like it's kind of shaped like a blade, like it's very thick, but if you hit on the side, it's a lot weaker. So potentially it's like the perfect storm of lack of shin conditioning, lack of setup, and just hitting at the wrong place on your shin that caused the injury.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I just thought it was so weird. It's the same person involved, but there's rare occurrences and different things and for it to happen, I mean, the chances, I don't know what the odds and all the numbers
Yeah,
say to
yeah,
that, but it's got to be pretty rare for the same guy to be involved, but
yeah,
it is harder for people to come back from that injury. Usually they're never the same. Anderson Silva was never the same.
no,
Weidman was never the same. We haven't seen Conor McGregor come
yeah,
back from that injury.
true,
Most people don't think he will. Like,
yeah, yeah.
at that kind of an age and that kind of success he's had in the sport, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to come back and risk the biscuit for possibly something happening again, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think something like Connor, like he's kind of transcended the sport. So like the amount of money he's going to make in fighting doesn't really make sense. And then he hasn't fought in like what 5 years or 4 years or something like that. Um, I think, I mean, if you watch Conor McGregor, like when he was coming up in the UFC as a featherweight, like super hungry, super dedicated, and then I think like fame kind of like took over. He's
Yeah.
obviously partying more, most likely using a lot of substances he shouldn't be, training less. He wants to go fight like he wanted to fight at middleweight. I'm like, get out of here, dude. It's. So I don't think it makes sense for him to come back. He's too big of a star for the amount of money that he's going to make. And even if you saw him, like I think one of his last good fights is when he fought Donald Cerrone, but Donald Cerrone like retired pretty soon after. So like,
Yeah.
when was the last time you saw him look good? And it was like when he won the title against Eddie Alvarez. That was probably like his last good fight against a really high level opponent.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough to really say, I mean, I guess he had a couple good performances. He did fight Nate a couple times in there.
Sure.
One loss, one,
Yeah.
controversial win, but yeah, it's hard to say if he will come back. That's such a tough injury, and
Yeah.
and making sure it's taken care of. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But I want to ask you something. If you could go back in time and talk to your white belt self, knowing what you know now and having all the experience you have now. What's some of the advice you would give to yourself about training and taking care of your body?
Sure. First one from a training perspective is I wouldn't be trying to win. I would be trying to learn. So, I came up the age, you're just trying to tap everybody. So I think the big problem here is I was developing primarily my A game. Like I just got an A game, but I didn't have a B or C game. So I feel like it really slowed down my progression. So I got promoted fast initially. Like I was a few months of training to get a blue belt. I think I was like 3 years. I got my purple belt, but I kind of stalled at purple belt and a brown belt for a bit. And I think it was because I wasn't trying to add new things to my game. I wasn't really thinking from a motor skill development point of view. Um, Also, when I was like a blue belt, I think I was a little bit too much like a soldier. Like I had an instructor who told me what to do and I did it versus like I don't think I was problem solving as well. So it wasn't until like when I went to PT school and I moved and I moved to a new instructor that was like less, he was just more open. Like he just, wouldn't tell me what to do. It's just you do your own thing. And I feel like that's when I started to actually like think and kind of problem solve on my own, which I think helped. And like now as black belt, I feel like I made the most progression in the last year because all I'm doing now is problem solving. Like I don't have anybody helping me. I mean, I
Yeah.
can reach out to people, but like for the most part, it's me looking at understanding jujitsu. If like this is our goal, how do we problem solve? And then I go apply. So I feel like the last year I made the most technical growth, like pretty much maybe since like white belt, right? So um,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
huge, right?
yeah.
You start all over at black belt again.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what's funny that like, people get to a black belt and they think they're done. I'm like, I feel like I'm just starting now. Like Like
Hmm.
there's no slowing down. Like I got to my black belt. I'm not. So I would say having that mindset would have been better for sure. I think I would be like considerably better at this stage if I had that mindset. From a physical capacity standpoint, like I really wasn't doing any strength training. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Like I would go to a personal trainer that was connected to my instructor, but like I'm not an athletic guy. I wasn't very strong. I had a bad knee. Like my knee's still compromised. Like I can again, it's pretty good. I can do a lot of stuff with it, but like my surgery leg is still literally half the strength of my other leg. And I don't think it's gonna, I think at this point it's not gonna be close because of the what the surgery did to my knee. But
Yeah.
like, I wish I took that seriously. Now I would run when I was getting ready for fights, but I thought I was running solely for like weight loss. So I think that really helped my cardio. But I wasn't doing it for the different reasons. I actually, after my pro fight, I realized I was like, I'm not that strong and I'm really slow. I need to work on getting stronger. So I actually started lifting after my pro fight. And then the way things happened, I was supposed to have another fight that fell through. Then I went to PT school and then I was kind of focused on that. So I didn't really get back to competing in MMA, but I wish I had taken like strength training much more seriously, like while I was actually competing.
Yeah. Yeah, strength training, it's something you have to do along the way, right? You can't do it later because it's kind of too late at that
Sure,
point, and your joints are probably pretty beat up at that
sure,
point. So it's something you kind of got to do along the way, regardless if it's heavy strength
yep,
training or just, light strength training just to
sure,
get the joints moving, right?
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I wish I'd done that sooner. And then obviously now I have a different philosophy on how I approach things. So I include a lot of like joint specific loading, which is going to be super relevant because I mean like the sport of jiu-jitsu is breaking people's joints. We should probably make sure the joints are pretty strong, right?
Yeah.
And like a lot of strength training will help, but it's not as specific. So like my current program is a mix of this joint training and then like heavy strength training. Big thing that I do that I think a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes struggle with is a volume problem, where like they look at powerlifters and they're trying to match the powerlifting volume, except they're also rolling 5, 6 more days a week. Like a powerlifter's not doing jiu-jitsu in addition to what they're doing, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
like that is their sport. So that doesn't mean you can't be using like heavy bilateral compound movements. You just have to change the volume and change your growth expectancy. Like again, I don't need to be strong for a power lifter. I need to be strong for jujitsu. So I don't need to be as strong. There's going to be a point of diminishing returns. Like I'm sure we all roll with those guys that are really strong. Like I've rolled with people that might be able to like squat or deadlift like twice what I can, but I don't feel like they're twice as strong as me. I just know they're
Yeah.
stronger. Like so, at
Yeah.
what point does is there less of a benefit? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you see injuries from guys
Sure,
that lift real heavy. You see
sure,
bicep tears
sure,
and tricep injuries
sure.
all the time. Elbows go out, and
Yeah.
so it can be kind of diminishing. Let me ask you this: as a professional in what you do and how you help athletes, do you recommend getting on some sort of TRT or anything like that to help recovery from injuries, or maybe if it's not something like that, something along the lines of something natural or over the counter
Sure.
or something that you could take to help increase your odds of coming back from a devastating injury?
So I'm a master 2, 3 athlete at this point. So I don't take TRT. I think I'm not going to recommend someone take it unless like their test values are low. That's when people kind of get in trouble. Something like TRT is kind of scary because once you're on, you're kind of like you're not coming off it, right?
Right, right.
So I don't tell people to take it. And I mean, if your doctor says, hey, your testosterone's low, you'll benefit, obviously they're going to benefit from it, right? Um, Personally, I think a lot of lifestyle modifications good enough. Like, how well are people sleeping? Do people prioritize sleep? Like, how well is their load management? A lot of
Right.
people they're like, well, I train 12 jiu-jitsu sessions a week, strength and conditioning. I'm constantly broken. Well, it's like, you need to kind of build up to that, right?
Yeah.
And then nutrition, like, and this is big for young guys. Like, they eat horribly, and then they think that they can cold plunge. No, 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 no. Like really, if you have good load management, good sleep, and good nutrition, that should be the bulk of your recovery. All that extra stuff is like the last 5%,
Yeah.
like cold plunge or whatever you're going to do. Personally, I'm not a peptide guy. I think that some of the theoretical tissue healing stuff for peptides is promising. There's just not enough data currently. Um, because one, all the research is done on animals, so we don't know what's the long-term repercussions. We do know that with some peptides, it can accelerate tumor growth. Now, I don't think that's been shown yet with BPC 157 or TB 1500. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But for some peptides, there are accelerated tumor growth. Uh, some research with some guys that do like ligament and tendon health. Um, they've experimented early studies. They haven't really noticed a big difference with peptides and stuff. So for me, it all comes down to, are you doing all the other stuff like those recovery methods? And then are you doing the proper rehab, right? So,
Right.
you have to think from a tissue healing perspective, like when you have an injury, first your body goes through the inflammation phase, which is needed because it kind of sends signals to the area to kind of stay off it. It starts getting chemicals and hormones to start to repair. Then you get to the proliferation phase where now your body starts laying down new tissue called collagen. And then you go through the remodeling phase where that new collagen tissue is still weak and you have to load it appropriately so it goes back to the way it was. So a lot of times what people do is they take these peptides or orthobiologics like PRP or stem cells and they think it's just going to magically fix them. It does enhance the healing process, but it doesn't rebuild that tissue resilience that occurs through proper tissue specific loading to regain that. And that's why, if you look at a lot of the injuries, a previous injury is by far the most common risk factor because most people just don't rehab properly. They're like, okay, well, it doesn't hurt. I'm ready to go back to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not when rehab starts. That's honestly when the pain goes away is where I can actually do much more rehab, right? Because often I can't load the tissue properly because of pain. When the pain goes away, now I can start to load the tissue. So a lot of times my rehab and strength and conditioning are very muddled because I'm using the same things. It's just I change the loading parameters.
Right. Right. That makes sense. And even you touched on sleep and diet are crucial, and that, a lot of people are eager, right? They're trying to go to the doctor and get their levels tested, but
Yeah,
a lot of things can change your levels of testosterone.
sure,
And the biggest things that they say are diet, poor diet, and poor sleep habits. So it's important to have those things and have those things dialed in,
yep,
especially, I mean, as you age, you want to make sure that your body's going to take a beating continuing to do what you do. So as you age, you have to make sure that these things are dialed in so you
sure,
can continue to train into your 80s till your
yep,
Helio Gracie age and
yeah,
things of that nature.
yeah.
Let me ask you, Doctor Kickass, what's some of the goals you have for helping jujitsu athletes in the future, and where do you see yourself in the future from now?
So I think like I remember when I was that young guy fighting, I had no health insurance and I got injured and I'm like, man, like I don't know what to do. So partly like I try to educate people like let's jujitsu guys hopefully be less dumb and like just going back too early. Like I want to be that guy that actually can give them real credible advice because again, like I'm rolling 5, 6 days a week, hard rolling, wrestling, I can invert all this stuff. So I'm not going to be one of those physicians who like tells people to quit. Like I get it, I do it. I teach jujitsu. I have students. I have competitors. But you have to be smart about the injury. I think that's the important thing. There's some things that are mild that you can work around. There's some that you can't. So one, when you have an injury, take care of it appropriately. It's early because if I can get an injury early, I can actually like an acute injury. I can manage it much better than someone comes to be like, I have this knee injury for 5 years. Now I have like some arthritis. I'm probably not getting that back to 100%. Now, that doesn't mean I can't improve it, but it's not going to be 100%.
Yeah.
And like I've had injuries that I waited too long because I wasn't a physical therapist at that point. And now, like, they're not going to be 100%. Like, my knee is not going to be 100% at this point. Now, again, that doesn't mean I can't do jujitsu, I can't wrestle, I can't compete. I can do all those things. But I did wish I had a leg that was as strong as my uninjured leg. But that's not the case because of where I am now. So if I can make jiu-jitsu people be a little bit less foolish about injuries, take their strength and conditioning a little bit more serious. And when I say strength and conditioning, um, I do think strength is important, but a lot of the stuff that I do, this joint training, I group in, and I think it's an excellent supplement. Like I use this with people even if they don't do jujitsu, because we know, like I said, jujitsu is about damaging joints, damaging tissue. We need to make sure that the joints and the tissue are as strong as they need. So one of the things that I try to do is if we know how injuries occur, why don't we do tissue loading into those tissues that we know are commonly injured in jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, that's probably the best thing that we can do for injury prevention in addition to understanding where injuries are going to happen, right? So like a lot of times, like on my Instagram is I show an injury happening, not necessarily because like I want to see someone get injured, but if you understand, like so often people are like, I didn't know I could get injured there. Now you're a little bit more aware. Like I was looking on Instagram and there was some dude that, you know, went for a flying armbar, missed it, landed on his head, knocked himself out. Like a lot of people don't know that when they go for flying submissions. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so just that awareness of how these injuries are going to occur. So those would be the three things: like taking care of an injury when you can, um, do the proper tissue loading that you need to, and understanding where these injuries are going to occur. And I think if we do that, then we're going to see the average jiu-jitsu athlete having a much longer longevity than they do now.
Yeah. And something, I've sent people your way. I had a student a few years ago, and he's a older gentleman, getting close to like 50, and he
Yeah,
tore up his ACL.
sure.
I told him, hey, before you do anything, you
Yeah,
got to talk to Doctor Kickass. He'll give
yeah,
you some advice,
sure,
steer you in the right direction. If somebody is injured and, doesn't know what to do, doesn't know if they need to go surgery or what
sure.
direction, and have some questions, how do people get a hold of you? How do they get in touch with you? And what kind of services can you offer them?
Yeah, so Instagram is probably the easiest way. That's the best way you can contact me. Um, so I have an online return to sport coaching. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll cover that gap of that initial injury to you know return to sport, because a lot of times we talk general physical therapy really falls off at that point. So once you get initial management, I kind of take over so I can give people more guidance. Being a jiu-jitsu black belt, I have a little bit more credible advice on when they can do different things, whether they're going back too soon. And that's the thing. Like I've sometimes I'll have to talk to people and say, "Hey, buddy, you're going way too fast. You need to
Yeah.
come. You need to slow it down." But then there's other people that I can encourage, and like you can do a little bit more. So um, we can kind of find that appropriate point. So I work with a lot of online people with that to kind of bridge that gap. I do that specific joint training for these athletes that want to bulletproof their body. I don't like the word bulletproof because we can't prevent injuries, but we can mitigate. We can build tissue resilience. We can make sure that our body is as healthy and as strong in all these positions that are going to happen in jiu-jitsu, whether we want to or not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crucial. You got to have the right game plan in place,
Sure,
if you want to continue to do this and continue to be effective doing it.
sure.
It's a long-term journey. The journey never ends in jujitsu. So these are things you have to focus on. Dr. Kickass, it's been awesome talking to you. Getting some of your advice, getting some of your knowledge out here. If people want to follow you, and how do they follow you on all of your socials?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the easiest way. That's kind of like the base from there, and you know, yeah, Instagram is the way to go.
Yeah, and do you work in office with people as well, if they're in your area?
Yeah, so I work with people in person. I work with people online. I teach jujitsu. I have a lot of courses for physical therapists too, to kind of if you're a physical therapist that wants to work with jujitsu athletes, I have online courses. I have an in-person course coming in November. So we're gonna get a whole bunch of physical therapists together. We're gonna break down jujitsu injuries, some rehab concepts, and we're all gonna get together and roll because we all like jujitsu, right? And if this tends to be something that I see, I'm definitely planning on doing some travel courses where I'd go down to like, California or New York, where I can kind of reach other physical therapists. I have a bunch of other cool projects, different papers, helping write a book on jiu-jitsu injuries, maybe working with the UFC PI on stuff. So I have a whole bunch of cool
Very cool.
stuff coming up in the near future, hopefully by 2026.
Awesome, man. And I mean, you kind of said it, but don't you think it's important that even if they don't train jujitsu or they have no interest in doing
Yeah,
the art, they still should understand it as a physical therapist, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, think of it this way: if you like, what sport are you in? Do you know an injury is going to occur? It's jujitsu. Like, I mean, we're trying to injure each other. Not really,
Yeah.
but kind of.
Yeah.
So, I
That
mean,
unwritten rule, right?
yeah. I mean, it's like, so it's like, what's like the best way to make money? It's like be rehab jujitsu athletes, right? So yeah, I mean, if you're going to work with a jujitsu athlete, you need to understand the demands of the sport, and then you need to know where these injuries are going to occur so that you can ensure that the athlete's safe to go back. I mean, think about it. How can you clear someone for sport if you don't understand the sport? Like you don't know what's going to happen. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I mean, that was kind of the basis for my education courses. How do I close the education gap so that a medical professional is more aware of how to work with jiu-jitsu athletes?
Right. It's amazing what you're doing, Doctor Kickass. Thank you for being a part of this episode of Grapplers Talk. Once again, thank you to our partners over at Butterfly X, BFX Gear on Instagram. Go check them out. Type in code word Grapplers Talk 10. You'll get 10% off your rash guards over there. Also, thank you to our partners over at Spar Bar Soap. We appreciate all of the support we get. Go buy some antifungal soap. Type in code word Grapplers Talk, and you will get 10% off of your order. Once again, thank you for downloading, tuning into the podcast. You can find us on Spotify, YouTube, each and every week on Instagram. Thank you once again, Dr. Kickass. This has been another great episode of Grapplers Talk. This is Dave, and we are out.